Nigerian opposition parties have really become lame ducks when it comes to elections these days. Try as they might, you won't find a sting in that duck's tail. The ruling party, the APC, appears to have tied them in knots when it comes to the ballot box, and no amount of maneuvering or effort appears to be able to deliver what they covet, which is wresting power from the incumbent. It's left the main opposition parties exhausted. Each time they prepared for an assault on the APC, each time they ended up outgunned. To them, Nigeria has become a failed democracy, and the elections have turned into what they've called spectacles of vote buying and selling in a toxic political environment. But can anyone even pin down what it really means to be a failed democracy? And are we only looking at the problems in the system rather than what an alternative to that system would be like? And even if we can deliver or define precisely what that alternative would be, would that alternative end up as a kind of whittling down or slow failure of the system that's in place right now, superseded by what Nigeria has become politically, with leaders who say without shame that you can't get rid of us because we are will over reason, criminality over the rule of law, and ultimately we embody the basest desires possible. How can this country best deal with that conundrum? I'll be joined in the studio by the lawyer and 2023 presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, Prince Adewole Adebayo, whose SDP party is calling for the cancellation of the ballot in Ondo State. Also on the program, a new book chronicling the horrors of military rule in Nigeria. Terrible for civilians, but a living nightmare for some military officers, especially if you were identified as a possible coup plotter or as being in sympathy with alleged coup plotters. You would fall from the opulence of power and influence to almost walking hand in hand with death. That's what happened to one officer, Colonel Ralph Bello Fadile, who in 1995 was fingered as a principal actor in a phantom coup against General Sani Abacha. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death, eventually escaping the firing squad by a whisker. And that's not the only time he came close to death. On another occasion, he was chained and interrogated upside down in a dungeon and beaten to a pulp. All this as Nigeria stormed through the political turbulence brought about by the military interventions that occurred frequently in the country. But through it all, he managed to emerge scathed but alive, and even succeeded in achieving a doctorate degree in law, paid for by the army. Colonel Fadile has written a book titled 9 Lives, the Bello Fadile Memoirs, and he joins me in the studio to talk about his dramatic experiences. I'm Charles Adewole, and this is Arise Prime Time. So, to the ghosts of democracy, restlessly prowling the corridors of power in Nigeria, wandering incomplete at every election, the latest in Ondo State, where, according to the opposition, those ghosts are yet again howling in protest amid alleged criminality. But the winners, the APC, are looking at them quizzically and insisting that the process was as free and as fair as possible. But even President Olusegun Obasanjo isn't convinced, and as Nigerians continue to gasp over this country's toxic politics, the former president has been talking about election fraud and the current system of accession to power, in which leadership is attained through bribery, intimidation, and violence. He suggests that electoral reform must be among the top targets for change in Nigeria. It's a view that's been echoed severally by the 2023 presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, Prince Adewole Adebayo, whose party, the SDP, has called for the just concluded Ondo governorship election to be immediately cancelled, citing innumerable instances of what it called open vote trading and very visible rigging. So is this yet another lament by an opposition party that's wallowing in the agony of defeat, or do they have a point? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the lawyer and 2023 presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, or SDP, Prince Adewole Adebayo. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Charles. Good to see you.
And were you in Ondo State then?
Yes, of course I was.
So you took part in that election?
I took part in voting.
Right, in voting.
Yes.
Right. Describe for us what you witnessed at that election from your observation perch. Was it overwhelming or underwhelming as a free and fair election?
Basically, we're not even talking in terms of free and fair now. We're talking in terms of legal and illegal. Because what took place is criminality. Because you are not allowed to buy or sell votes. So essentially, what happened was massive vote buying and vote selling. That's where I have problems. There are minor issues like INEC officials not coming on time, not having the regular problems that you found with INEC.
Logistical problems.
Logistical problem. In fact, they had to come to my compound to borrow a table for them to use and things like that. So that we can overlook, not coming on time. But it went peacefully, but the vote buying was not hidden at all. It was well known. It will remind you, if you have attended a church bazaar before, a church harvest, where you just offer money. It was open. And even the media just decided to ignore it for I don't know why, because it was staring them in the face. And even common people, when interviewed, will casually tell you, oh, it was a nice election. I sold my vote and I got my money.
Yes, I actually heard one person saying.
Yeah, so it was, and that's the part that I find most unfortunate, and it makes the whole exercise illegal. Not just because the election is lost and won, but because it is not right. You are the party in power. If you want to make vote buying legitimate, you have enough members in the National Assembly to amend the Electoral Act and say you can sell and buy votes, and we can list votes as part of the commodities on the stock exchange. So then you know that if I want to run an election, I get shareholders, I raise funds, then we go and do a bazaar. But this bizarre thing that they are doing is just not right.
Yeah, no, I think everybody in their right mind would agree with your assessment. But then there is also another way of looking at this, given where Nigeria has come from in terms of how bad elections have been and how blatant the rigging and the violence and the intimidation has been. How much of a spectacle was this Ondo election in the way that other elections in Nigeria have become a spectacle of vote buying, rigging, and violence? I'm not in any way suggesting that what you're saying is not accurate or inaccurate or whatever. I'm just saying in terms of degrees.
Well, it's a question which every criminologist would. I remember my teacher, Professor Kwafo, asking us that kind of question. It's like degree between murder and manslaughter, which is more serious, but the victim is dead. So now you look at jurisprudence of it. What I know is that in Edo, for example, there was vote buying, but I was in Edo. I didn't vote there. But in Ondo State, where I did vote.
And you're from Ondo State?
I'm from Ondo,
yeah.
Where I noticed, and given the history of that state with respect to the tendency to have some moral high ground, moral standing, the idea of selling votes, buying votes. This is not the first election. I think it started with fortunately, the former governor, the late governor. I think until Mimiko's time, the idea that you could sell or buy votes was almost impossible because at that time, people would still believe in the candidates and arguments and all of that. But in recent times, buying votes has become so open. I have seen elections. And this is why I'm talking to you about it. I've seen elections where people hide to sell votes or buy votes. I haven't seen an election where it is the main business itself, where law enforcement is there. In some polling units, you can ask media reporters to give you reporters. Polling units, the law enforcement are part of the commission agencies and all of that. The infrastructure of selling and buying, sometimes the person who is the invoice is the policeman who tells you, okay, yes, if voted for you, pay or don't pay. So that it's the death of a society. I'm not heartbroken that the APC candidate, Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa, is the governor. No, it's not somebody I'm against that much. But the idea that you could have a political class, a leadership of a constitutional government, forming themselves into that kind of brazen criminality and executing it. And if you look at Ondo State, in recent times, the APC has shown remarkable political ingenuity. The major political elites are all going their way. So they have enough talent, political talent, to convince the people and still try to win by a legitimate, simple majority. That they decided as a whole, including a sitting governor, a entire political party, elite, that they don't have enough credibility to convince voters that they needed to openly budget money, openly pay voters, and do it so brazenly and involve law enforcement and other people in it. Is why I'm talking. In fact, it's possible that if you do a rerun, they might still win because they look well prepared. You
just want it to be won fair and square.
Yes, and to be legitimate, right. not to criminalize politics.
So your assessment, because obviously we had Lucky Aiyedatiwa on Arise News this morning, the morning show. I mean, your assessment is that he obviously emerged as the winner, but that he will not be able, or he ought not to be able to beat his chest and say that he won the ballot fair and square.
No, not at all. I think he has an image. He's a quite nice gentleman, and he has some political innocence because even the opposition party, everybody was sympathetic with him when he was being impeached by his own party, when they did not let him succeed or even manage the affairs of the state while his boss, the former governor, was incapacitated. So people like him. I don't know whether they like him to the extent of preferring him to other candidates, but he now being inaugurated into this criminality is most unfortunate for him, for the state, even for me, to witness him transform from a good-looking, nice gentleman, quiet, just coming to offer himself for service, to one who can be in this kind of conspiracy. And it is not the way I want governance to be done in Ondo State. And what makes it very dangerous is that you must have been monitoring the statistics. Ondo State is the least poor state in Nigeria. In the last few years, Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has consistently shown that Ondo State has the least poverty index. And if in that kind of state, you can weaponize poverty to the point of giving money to people to vote for you, what do you think will happen in more distressed states? And if you allow this to happen, people will copy it. And I must say it for fairness, it wasn't only the APC that was buying votes. There was another political party who tried to compete with them.
Which political party?
PDP. Right. They tried to do a Swiss challenge. You know, when you try to bid in auction and somebody offers 10,000, then you say, okay, I too offer you 10,000. They ran out of money, ran out of breath at the point. And so it is, to be fair, it is not only APC. I don't know whether the vote buying that they did was because they expected that PDP was doing the same thing. But PDP, I don't know why, an opposition party, they're not in government on those states, they've not been in government for a long time. I mean, they went around raising money, they too were buying votes. So, but of course, APC outgunned them in this criminal journey towards infamy.
So, I mean, given all these recurring, coruscating problems at every election and the cost to the losers of not only the campaign and the election itself, but the legal wrangling afterwards, and given the near certainty that the bigger parties are allegedly going to do the things that you mentioned, and as a result are almost certainly going to win, why do you think the smaller parties bother to enter these elections at all, when you would have thought that their consistent losses would help to concentrate their minds and formulate the decision that they needn't bother to do it again?
No, you see, in a democracy, one, you have a set of ideas that you believe in. And if you don't articulate them, if you don't offer them, you can't sleep. I cannot sleep, for example. I have water policy, energy policy, security policy, economy policy, educational policy. I cannot have them in my head. I'll run mad. I need, because I see something going on, society going wrong, and I have a solution. So I will go to the people to offer this solution. Whether they listen well, we'll keep coming. That's the idea. But what we are fighting against is not that someone wins an election or not. Is that the process politics is becoming a criminal enterprise. Right. And more people are getting recruited into it. So it's got to a point where it is on the supply side, it's also on the demand side. Sometimes when you go, even in smaller parties, some smaller parties are not buying votes, not because they don't believe in it, because they don't have the money. Right. That if they had the money, they would...
So the political philosophy is wrong.
It's wrong, basically. Right. So we've had, even internally, some discussion in our party where one or two people will come out and say, suppose we find somebody who can give us some money, can we try and buy some votes? We always tell them, it doesn't work. Even if we won a lottery, we're not going to buy votes. It's wrong. Because I know the long-term implication of...
But you're also tempered by the fact that, you're a smaller party and the chances of your winning are actually very slim, aren't they?
No, chances of winning by illegitimate means have been ruled out.
Right.
It doesn't mean that within our party, we don't have individuals who have more money than the people in APC or PDP. But the people we have in our party are people who can spend ₦1 billion on charity. But they will not spend ₦1 on bribery or criminality.
And that is somebody like yourself.
Someone like me and other people like me. So I have people in our party who are MDs or banks, who have other things. We have people who are individually wealthy, professionally wealthy. The issue is that politics is the highest art of the state. And if it is apparent to the people that you are just a bunch of unserious people who have no charisma, no message, or who don't have the confidence to come and face the people, win or lose, that what we are doing now is just buying votes. That's why you see there's apathy. The rest will say, my vote will not count. Why am I bothering to come out? That's what leads to the other apathy. I remember one conversation I had with my local people. When they asked me, where are you, sir? I said, I'm in Doha, Qatar. Will you still come home to vote? I said, yes. And someone said, why are you spending $20,000 to buy a ticket to come down to vote? You can just say half of that. 10,000 people vote on your behalf with that kind of money. Why are you coming? I said, no, my one vote is important. What we are trying to let people know is that we said we don't want military rule. We don't want monarchy. We don't want any other system. We want a democratic system. And when someone is attacking it at its core, delegitimizing the process, the social contract that used to exist in Ondo State, under Ajasin, under Olumilua, under Agago, even under Shegumi Miko, that social contract has become a commercial contract where people just believe, I don't know these guys, I don't care what they stand for, but I know once in 4 years, they will come with money, I collect my money, I block my nostrils, just thumbprint and walk away.
But in spite of all that money that you allege was distributed there, I mean, there was voter apathy. The turnout, I understand, was quite low.
The apathy was two ways. One, there are people who believed, and I believe wrongly, that no point making the effort. This thing is going to be rigged anyway. There are those who believe that election is vote buying, vote selling. I'm not that wretched. I don't have time for that. That's why I want us to eliminate that. I don't mind you defeating me with 10,000 votes. If all the votes you get, legitimate votes, is 45,000, you are the governor, because that's the highest vote. But the idea of introducing criminality into election, there are some improvements in the election, I must tell you, because there used to be a time in this country, especially under the PDP days, where they would just sit down in a coven somewhere, conjure magical figures, announce the figures without even the ballot paper coming into your vicinity. Some governors are still doing that in local government elections. They will just not show up at all, stay in government house and announce fictional numbers. That is not what INEC is doing. There's some improvement in the system because the beavers and all this other biometric verification has reduced the possibility. But what they are now bringing, there used to be a time also when there was violence. You will not be allowed to come and vote. Even towards the end of the...
well, we saw it in 2023.
Yes, even yes, they will come out, you can't vote, they chase you away. That did not happen this time around. So I don't want them to be doing substitution of criminality. You drop one bad habit, you pick another one. And I think that many people are saying, many discussions on it, people say, oh, well, okay, if they are buying votes, you too find money and buy votes. But that is wrong.
No, I agree with you 100%.
Some will say, okay, maybe if the voter collects money, he may still use his principle and then go and vote for who he likes. No, if you have principle, you won't collect money.
Absolutely.
Secondly, the person paying you the money is monitoring you because the whole thing is, you remember that part of the scripture where Jesus came and turned the table and said, get out of my father's house? That's how a polling booth looks like now. You just come there, you could see the setting, it looks like a supermarket. The guy who is canvassing is at the door, the guy who is holding the money is on the other side, the policeman who is maintaining law and order.
I think what is worrying and frightening about what you say is how overt it is.
It is. They are negotiating. That you will go to PDP and say, how much is it? Okay, hold on. The deal is not closed yet. I'm still coming back. Then you go to the APC canvasser and say, look, can you switch challenge? I've been offered 5,000 here. What are you guys saying?
And the fact that it's done allegedly under the full glare of security agents.
If it's just the full glare only, full glare is bad, but in some cases, participation, because it's a marketplace.
It's unforgivable.
And like the way you find policemen in front of banks to make sure that the bank is not looted, in marketplaces to ensure that there's security, that kind of security they provide for this buying and selling of votes, it is bad. We should stop it. I don't want it to become part of the training. When you enter politics, they'll tell you, the first thing you do, find money for bribery. And I must say to you that some of these things we are catching will start earlier. People who are buying votes now on election day bought votes in their party's primaries. That is the problem.
Right.
So from the moment,
trend,
yes, from the moment they came to the candidacy or they showed interest, they buy the form. But when they are doing the primaries on the election, they pay the delegates, and they think that this is part of the investment that they are making into politics. Some believe, like people like us, are just quixotic. We don't know what we are doing because we are unrealistic.
They think they're the smart ones.
Yeah, they think that what they are doing is the right thing to do because that's a convention.
There is something, though, I think we touched on this earlier, about politicians, isn't there, that they seem to want to come back over and over again, even if each time the political spectacle doesn't go the way that they wanted it to go.
The idea is this. A country needs a political
And we're not talking about people like you, arguably, who have principles and a vision and something you want. I mean, I'm just talking about your, run-of-the-mill sort of shifty, dodgy politician.
The issue is this. Some of the people we call politicians are not politicians. So me bringing your lapel mic and putting it here doesn't make me a journalist. So to be a politician, you must stand for something. You must be interested in representative democracy, and you must be interested in the argument of the day. What is the issue that is deciding the election? Then you go and canvass, and then if you lose, you lose. If you win, you govern. But these people are behaving like marauders and people who are actually purchasing things. They want to capture something, and they must win at all costs. And I'm telling them, especially in Ondo State, I know almost everybody there. There is a redeeming feature. These are people who ordinarily are good people, well-trained, they have a good background before politics. They should not adopt this style of politics. It is dangerous because people are seeing it. If you go to any WhatsApp group in Ondo State, people are discussing, why are we even doing elections? It is better for the government to just share the money and all of that. So the young people now don't believe that talent gets you
anywhere. It's a terrible thing, isn't
organizing gets you anywhere.
So given that, how worried are you about what this means for future elections in Nigeria? The next one is coming up, the next big one is coming up in 2027. I mean, what does this Ondo election say to you about future Nigerian elections?
What it says to me is that the future of Nigeria is bright, provided that we can start screaming the way we are screaming now, and that we don't let people get away with it. We at least bring it up. We will go to the tribunal to try it. If the judiciary chooses to see it, it's up to the judiciary. They don't see it, but we put it on record. And we keep talking. There's no way I see them. I see the governor. I see those who are there.
But you have evidence.
The evidence is everywhere.
No, it's not about being everywhere. I'm saying, you're a lawyer when you get into court.
We have judicial-grade evidence.
Right. Okay.
We have anecdotal evidence. But it is common knowledge. I don't think they would deny this. I mean, if you put a camera in front of them, they might be obliged to try to say, okay, let me just deny for the record. But they know, and it's a conversation. We all meet. It's not only an election time that we meet. We must have this constant conversation in our society. And there must be people in the civil society who will pick this up and make it an issue. The same way we dropped the idea of beating people up on election day, running away with the ballot. Some still run away with it now, but it's not like rampant as before. I'm looking forward to 2026, maybe after we've done Ekiti and done Osun, and watch out for vote buying. I complained to General Abubakar this morning when we met that, okay, you said we should be peaceful, there's peace committee. I told John Cardinal Onoyeko, I said, you said we should be peaceful. We see we are peaceful. But please add it to your homily that we should stop vote buying. Right. So if we talk about it, the idea is not about who is doing it. It is a bad thing to do.
Absolutely.
In a country that is run by a democratic precept. You don't want people from outside observing your elections and they say, oh, you have been elected by buying votes. You don't want that to be what you study. You don't want that to be the convention that people grow into. It's very bad, and we should talk about it, not because you win or lose election. Right. It should be a consensus in the political class if we are going to distinguish ourselves from a criminal class.
Thank you very much indeed. It's always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Prince Adewole Adebayo is a lawyer and the 2023 presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. God bless Nigeria.
And you're watching Arise Prime Time. 20 more still ahead. We'll look at a new book chronicling the horrors of military rule in Nigeria as this country stormed through the political turbulence brought about by a succession of military interventions. Stay with us. Welcome back to Arise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day. I'm Charles Adewole. Now to a new book chronicling the horrors of military rule in Nigeria. Terrible for civilians, but a living nightmare for some military officers, especially if you were identified as a possible coup plotter or as being in sympathy with alleged coup plotters. You would fall from the opulence of power and influence to almost walking hand in hand with death. That's what happened to one officer, Colonel Ralph Bello Fadile, who in 1995 was fingered as a principal actor in a phantom coup against General Sani Abacha. He was arrested, tried and sentenced to death, eventually escaping the firing squad by a whisker. And that's not the only time he came close to death. On another occasion, he was chained and interrogated upside down in a dungeon and beaten to a pulp. All this as Nigeria stormed through the political turbulence brought about by the military interventions that occurred frequently in the country. But through it all, he managed to emerge scathed but alive, and even succeeded in achieving a doctorate degree in law, paid for by the army. Now here's the bad news. Colonel Fadile retired. I mean, the good news is he's written a book titled 9 Lives, the Bello Fadile Memoirs. He was supposed to join me in the studio to talk about his dramatic experiences, but for some reason he's not here. But thankfully, the man who actually launched the book and spoke prolifically at that book launch is Prince Adewole Adebayo. He is still here with me and has kindly obliged to say a few words in order to fill the yawning space and gap that would have been left there if he hadn't been around. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. We're trying to get some clips of you speaking at that event earlier today. But, I mean, you know Colonel Fadile quite well. I mean, what an extraordinary experience he must have had.
Yeah, he's one of those legends that you read about, and his own cat has 9 lives, and it looks like those 9 lives are imposed on him. It's like the country was trying to do an experiment with him. He had wanted to just be a pure academic, a very brilliant young person, and due to his impecunious background, the only place he could go, as you will see many of the stories, was that, okay, the military offered you education, training, without you having to pay fees. And he went and joined the, I think it was in the 11th course 11 of the Nigerian Defense Academy. He was the best student, best cadet there, and started a career, became the first military officer to qualify as a lawyer, became head of the director of the Army legal unit, and served in many peace missions and all of that. And you will see that professional trajectory. But you will see where that professional trajectory intersects with politics, where now you are in trouble, not because of what you're doing professionally, but because of how it intersects the power relations in the country. And that is the experience you see, not only of him, of so many in that generation, that since the military decided to embrace politics, then the military had to suffer all the crises that you find in a political environment. So officers who were esprit de corps, brothers and comrades in arms, now became suspicious of one another. And the crescendo came when the military itself became tired of this crisis of politics. And there was a division in the military of those who said, let's go back to the barracks, and those who say, let us continue. And you will know the remarkable story of General Shola Williams, who just resigned and walked away. But Colonel Fadile is not the type that could just resign and walk away. He decided to stay in-house and make it his life mission to get as many officers as possible, to have a majority of them saying the military must return to the barracks. So,
and yet, in spite of all of that, he was fingered a number of times as a potential coup plotter.
Yes.
And in fact, at one point, he was tried and found guilty and sentenced to death. Yes. I wonder what the conditions were that made him guilty. Because death is the ultimate thing, isn't it? I mean,
you see, what I see, first, death is not something you can use to harass a soldier. Like I said at the event today, when you join the army or armed forces, you leave your life at the door. So that dying or not dying for a...
Yeah, but that's a theoretical thing.
No, for a military...
When the gun is pointed to your head, every human being gets the shiver.
From my experience, I come from a family that has produced many military officers. The way we look at death is the way a patient looks like taking an injection. They may not want to die, but if the death comes, they just take it like that. They always believe among themselves that the bullet that is meant to finish you is somewhere in someone's gun, somewhere. However, what has happened in their own time is that professional disagreements, professional exercise of discretion, professional association can land you in trouble in ways you do not imagine. In many of the 9 lives, there were some in which it was clear that he wasn't involved in any plotting.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, for example, let me give you an example that he gave in the book, which is that in 1986, he was on training and on leave to further his studies. Then there was a coup or alleged coup involving Mama Fasa and the others, Yoshe and all the rest of them, which is now part of Nigeria history. But critically, every one of the 4 principal accused persons, individually, without consulting the other, they will ask, okay, now you are facing this court martial. Who is going to be your lawyer? He will say, I want...
Yes, I read something about that.
Then General Abacha, who said, look,
why are they all asking for this man?
This coincidence is too much.
Yeah.
But it turned out that when they investigated, they found out that it was just a coincidence because it was such a very good lawyer.
But he was still sentenced to death.
No, it wasn't sentenced on that occasion.
Right.
On that occasion, he was just asked, my friend, scram out of here and go back to wherever you came from. So that was one of the 9 lives that he used on that occasion because others, for less, have been taken to a firing squad. Now, in his own case, in this one that really got him and got him into life imprisonment and all of that, it was a case of working with the head of state, according to the records, General Abacha, trying to coordinate the armed forces, and in the process, still leading a team of renegades who were of the view that Abacha needed to hand over, find the solution to hand over. Now, there was this constitutional conference that was taking place at that time, and a retired military officer, General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, had also raised the motion that the military needed to leave immediately. So some of them who were still in service latched onto that, and they were holding meetings. But in a military government in which the head of state is not willing to leave now, any attempt, any motion, anything you're doing that is going to truncate his ambition, his continuity in office, is in a way...
that's the way they see it.
That's the way they see it. And
it's a threat.
Yeah, so the investigation was going on as to whether those meetings were regular army activities or attempts to plot a coup. So that was how that Mujapero panel came up. And in the process, I think they just got to a conclusion and said, you know what, you look guilty because you are asking for the end of military rule. And I'm the one in charge of military rule now. So that's how they came to that. And then it involved other people, former President Obasanjo, other people who had retired from the military. So that's the idea. The idea is this, that the military tried to solve problems that only could be solved by politics. They inserted themselves into politics. The first casualty of that was that the esprit de corps collapsed. It was the same military that led us to a civil war, because what we had as civil war were 2 factions of the military, one led by Gawan and those who said, well, let us succeed Agoyinrosi. The other group led by Colonel Ojukwu, who said, look, no, I don't agree. And then that metamorphosed into an ethnic thing, regional thing, and we had the civil war. When they came back, there was still a question of, was Gawan overstaying or not overstaying? And in Nigeria, with our ethnicity, with our religions, and other differences, when 2 or 3 people of same solidarity, background, same ethnicity, when they find themselves in politics, there's a belief that they kind of bond together. When one of them is in trouble, it tends to look like all of them are in trouble at the same time. So the army started to recognize ethnicity, other factors, and every problem that you have in politics, for which military regimentation is not equipped for. The military is supposed to be a place where my word is my bond,
right.
You're my brother, we work together. So what happened was that meeting a fellow officer casually for a drink, going to attend a function, doing army activities together, if one person is in trouble, the other is in trouble. Today, a former chief of army staff gave a testimony, General Adewole Kaziri, that because he was so close to Colonel Bello was working under him as director of Army Legal Services. When Bello came under suspicion, people started asking questions. If Bello is plotting anything, why have we not gone to question Kaziri? So that was how the cancer of suspicion spread across, and that's why you will see many of these books being written. And my advice to the public is that we should not be too dramatic. We should allow them to speak.
Right.
So that we can learn a lot of lessons from this. And more importantly, for those who are in the civil space, who are tired of what we are experiencing in politics today, who say, oh, maybe we should have another system, maybe the military should come back.
Salutary warning.
Yes, so when they see what that means, the meat grinding that takes place with people's lives and career when the military is there, and the danger and the hazard of just mere talking and just mere association. And if you read the biographies of many people or unpublished accounts of people's tribulations, many people lost their career just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And I find it fascinating. There's one bit where he was talking about living in a house on Macpherson Avenue.
Yeah, the haunted house.
In Lagos with other military officers.
Yes.
And all those who lived were involved in coups.
Yes.
And ended up being found guilty.
Yes.
I don't know if they were shot. I know at least one or two of them were
He's
shot.
the only one who is not shot.
Yeah, all the rest of them were shot, basically, except himself. I mean, that's an extraordinary... That's why he talked about 9 lives.
Yes, because maybe by coincidence, maybe just, maybe it's destiny, but that house, Dimka stayed there, Iyoshe stayed there, and many other people, the third person stayed there. So he also stayed there. And it happened that each one who stayed there got involved, got accused of a coup, got tried, and summarily executed. He was the only one who, of course, went through most of the phases, got accused, investigated, tried, sentenced, but in his own case, well, he didn't get shot, and he's here with us.
But, I mean, he also had a lot of other problems, didn't he? I mean, he had a lot of problems with Buhari. Muhammadu Buhari, who just didn't like him. In fact, I think Buhari hated his guts, according to the book.
Yeah, if you have dealt with Conabello, I have dealt with him, but there are moments when I hate his guts too. So that's his, because he is outspoken, and in the military, one of his colleagues today was talking about when they were just cadets, and they were supposed to be sent for training in Pakistan. And they were asked to report to the military secretary. And they were bloody lieutenants or so. And they got there and they said, well, sorry, you cannot go to Pakistan. And this little brat started saying, why can we not go there? So, and I was arguing with them, and the fellow officer have to say, can you just shut up, please? So he is the kind of person who, no matter his rank, no matter how highly placed you are, if he believes in something, he will speak out. And because he was also a military lawyer, or he's a military lawyer, he decided to speak in matters that didn't concern him. The incident with General Buhari had to do with a trial.
Briefly, because
at a trial at Ibadan. So when General Buhari was GOC in Ibadan, I think Second Mechanized Brigade, he disciplined an officer, second division. He disciplined an officer. And Conabello wrote a report that the disciplinary process did not follow military tradition. It was like German Gestapo. So General Buhari took an exception to being compared to the military Gestapo. So anywhere he saw him, he said, either you will be in the army or I will be, or one of us has to leave the army. It turned out that neither of them left the army. But wherever he saw him, even in the Down Barracks, when he was head of state, and I was told anecdotally that even when he became civilian president in 2015, when he saw him again, he reminded him that you are the guy who called me.
So don't come anywhere near me.
Exactly. So that's kind of thing.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Thank you for filling the place because Colonel Fadile was supposed to be here, but obviously he got held up. I don't know what it is, but fortunately you were there and you know him very well. And I appreciate your taking the time to share a bit about that very interesting book.
Thank you very much.
With us. Thank you very much.
And I'm sure he was going to see you one of these days.
Oh, we'll see. Thank you. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.